Hello dear students, today we'll discuss physiology of diffusion of gases at respiratory membrane. Just to start with, let's see what is the basic law of gas, molecular basis of gas. Diffusion is basically, you can see pressure is directly proportional to concentration of gas molecule. So from higher concentration to lower concentration across this, they move, and at equilibrium they will make it balanced. So this principle is working across our respiratory membrane. So objectives of today's talk is law of gases, composition of gases, partial pressure of gases and respiratory membrane, and factors affecting the respiratory diffusion of gases across the respiratory membrane. Just to have an anatomical look of how the respiratory system is there. This is our conducting zone, that is our trachea, and these are the two lungs where there's actually main oxygen and CO2 exchange takes place. Now in this you can see this upper conducting part, or you can mention as upper respiratory tract. This is the larynx, trachea, which divides into two branches. These are called as primary bronchi. They subdivide to secondary bronchi and further to tertiary bronchi. So this part includes the conducting zone, and this is not taking any part in gas exchange. So whatever air remains in this part is not taking part in the gas exchange. Coming down to our basic part where gas exchange takes place, if you see this is the terminal bronchiole, which starts after the tertiary bronchiole. Further, these are the vessels which are supplying pulmonary vein and pulmonary artery, which we have discussed in previous lecture. These are the smooth muscles which are covering the terminal bronchiole. Contraction of this will reduce or change with the diameter of conducting zone. These are the respiratory bronchiole, and the most basic unit of lungs, that is the alveoli. This is the principal site where we are having a gas exchange takes place. These are the capillaries. So these two are very, very important. At this part only there is a gas exchange takes place, means from the capillaries to alveoli the oxygen is delivered, and from alveoli back to capillary the CO2 is taken back. Coming down to alveolus, which is nothing but bunch of alveoli together, is called as the alveolus. So this bunch where we are having a bunch of alveoli is called as alveolus. So alveolus is nothing but bunch of alveoli. So here you can see this is the conducting zone and this is the respiratory zone. So we will be coming down to discuss what exchange takes place at this place. So here I have shown just some amount of air is entering, so it is going up to the alveoli individual. Now just see the functional division of respiratory system: conducting zone and respiratory zone. Conducting zone means it consists of it will conduct only the air from the atmosphere up to the respiratory zone, and respiratory zone is a zone where actually exchange of gases takes place. So this exchange from nose to the terminal bronchiole. And respiratory zone includes respiratory bronchiole, alveolar duct and alveoli. So its main function is filtration and air conditioning, and its function is basically gas exchange. So our focus will be on this, where the gas exchange actually takes place, that is diffusion of gases. So amount of air remaining in this part which is not taking part in gas exchange is called as a anatomical dead space. Why mention anatomical? Because there is no provision for gas exchange in this region. There is no respiratory membrane here, but here we are having actually respiratory exchange. Now dead space means air which cannot exchange gases with the blood. It is called as a dead air. So air in the conducting division is called as anatomical dead space. and volume of gas not equilibrating with blood, that is wasted ventilation, is called as a physiological dead space. In the previous lecture, we have discussed the ventilation perfusion ratio. Means at some alveoli there is a good ventilation, but there is no perfusion. So because of this, gas exchange will not take place. And in other alveoli there is good perfusion but no ventilation. In both conditions, ventilation will be wasted. So this is called as a physiological dead space, because it is possible to have exchange, but due to physiological reasons we are not having exchange of gases at this place. In a healthy people, few alveoli are non-functional and anatomical and physiological dead space are identical. In pulmonary diseases, some alveoli may be unable to exchange gases with the blood because they lack blood flow or their pulmonary membrane is thickened by edema. So abnormally we will have a increased dead spaces due to diseases. It's nothing but simply because of ventilation perfusion mismatch. Now let's see the composition of atmospheric air which we are breathing normally. At sea level, the pressure of gases is 76 millimeters of mercury. Out of that, dominant gas in the atmospheric air is nitrogen. You will be surprised to find we are inhaling nitrogen more as compared to the oxygen, because the content of atmospheric air is almost 78% is nitrogen. It is giving the pressure about 597 millimeters of mercury. Oxygen, which is only 20% in the atmospheric air, it is giving a pressure of 159 millimeters of mercury. Water is 0.5, that is 3.7 millimeters of mercury. And carbon dioxide, it is 0.3 millimeters of mercury. So these are called as a partial pressure. So let's see what is meant by partial pressure. Air is a mixture of gases, each of which contributes a share called its partial pressure to the total atmospheric pressure. So whatever contribution of that gas in the atmospheric pressure, that is called as a partial pressure. For example, as we know that oxygen is 20% in the atmospheric air, so it is contributing 20% of total pressure in the atmospheric air, that is 159 millimeter of mercury. Now this whole concentration will change with altitude. At sea level, this is the pressure of a gas, that is 1 atmosphere is equal to 760 millimeters of mercury. As we ascend up at high altitude, gradually we are going to the hill station, and at the very top the pressure goes on reducing. So when we are traveling in an aircraft, we are quite at a high, about 10,000, 12,000 feet from the ground. So the pressure might come down to 0.5, that is 1 atmosphere at ground level. It may reduce 50%, it may reduce to 60, 70, 80% like this. Similarly, when you go down in the deep sea, the pressure goes on increasing. At sea level it is 1 atmosphere, at the deep sea it may be 2, 3, 4 atmosphere. So like this, this pressure goes on changing. So this is very, very important. We must know what is the atmospheric pressure, because based on that we will have this gas pressure which we are more interested. For example, if you are going at high altitude where the pressure is half of the ground level, so that means oxygen partial pressure will be half to 159, that will be around 80 millimeters of mercury, which will affect our diffusion of gases. So it is very important that we should know the partial pressure of atmospheric pressure where we are moving constantly. So this is the partial pressure. Now Dalton's law states that total pressure of a gas is a mixture in the sum of partial pressure of individual gases. That is, this is the calculation. Partial pressure of nitrogen, partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of water and CO2 combinedly form the total atmospheric pressure. This is based on the Dalton's law. Now let's come to the pressures which we actually are inspiring and expiring, and what are the partial pressure at our respiratory system. Normally, as we mentioned, we are inspiring air at a sea level. This is the partial pressure, that is oxygen is having partial pressure of 159 millimeters of mercury, and PCO2 it is 0.3 millimeters of mercury. Now this will change with again the pollution. If we are going in a polluted city, this pressure will rise. So it is very important that what is the PCO2 level we are inspiring. So normally this is the inspired air. Now in the lung there is a constant exchange taking place. Here you can see the oxygen is being taken in the blood and CO2 is delivered back in the alveoli. So when this inspired air is coming in the alveoli, it will get mixed because some amount of oxygen is going and some amount of CO2 is constantly coming inside. So due to this, partial pressure of alveoli will change. So here you can see alveolar air is having partial pressure of 104 millimeters of mercury and PCO2 40 millimeters of mercury, because constantly CO2 is being released from the blood back to the alveoli and oxygen is being taken off. So even though inspired air is having 159 millimeters of mercury oxygen partial pressure, but at alveoli it comes down to 104 and CO2 level rises. Now this is constantly entering in the blood. Now when we are expiring, see what is happening. This air, which consists of this inspired air, will be remaining in the conducting zone. So when this air is going from the lungs, alveoli back to the atmosphere, again it will have a different composition. You can see here the partial pressure of oxygen becomes 116 because this 104 is being mixed down in this air which is present in this dead space, and this CO2 which is going from here is again mixed with this 0.3. So this will come down to 32 millimeters of mercury because of mixture of expired air with the dead space air which consists of the inspired air. So because of this, expired air will have again a different partial pressure of oxygen. Now in this diagram you can see constantly air is coming and here is the actually exchanging taking place. So here I have shown the partial pressure at different levels. Already we have noted this inspired air, we have noted the alveolar air. Now inside the blood what is happening now? In the blood oxygen is coming and combining with the hemoglobin, and in addition the bronchial circulation is also giving blood down to the pulmonary vein when it is entering. So that bronchial blood will be deoxygenated blood that is entering. So due to this physiological shunt, partial pressure of oxygen comes down to 95 millimeters of mercury. So it is 95 to 98 is usually the partial pressure of arterial blood which we are there, and the CO2 is having 40 millimeters of mercury because the blood is rich in the CO2 which is taken up by the tissues. So at the tissue fluid, if you check, partial pressure of oxygen is only 40 millimeters of mercury because it is constantly consuming oxygen for the biochemical reaction which you have studied in the biochemistry. Different cycles are conducting constantly, aerobic cycles are taking place. So they are consuming the oxygen. So oxygen is consumed at tissues and CO2 is constantly produced. So in the tissue you can see CO2 level is 46 millimeters of mercury. Now in the venous blood, as you know, the oxygen is being taken up by tissues. So it is coming down to 40 millimeters of mercury partial pressure because of constant consumption of oxygen in the tissues, and CO2 is released back from tissues to the blood. So this is the concentration of deoxygenated blood which is coming here and gas exchange taking place. So in all, these are the pressure of gases at the different places. In the inspired air it is different, alveolar air it is different, arterial blood, this is the tissue fluid which is inside the tissues where there is a production and consumption of oxygen and production of CO2. This is the venous blood which is coming back from tissues down back to the heart, and this is the expired air which is getting mixed with the dead space air. So due to this we are getting difference in the pressures. So actual gas exchange taking place at our level of alveoli. This we have seen. This is our alveoli. These are the squamous cell which are forming layers of alveoli. This is the capillaries which are formed from the pulmonary artery and joining back to form pulmonary veins. So this is basically a respiratory membrane. across capillaries and the alveolar epithelium. So let's have a close look to this. So this is the respiratory membrane. So this is the capillary endothelium and this is the alveolar squamous cell. So let's see what are the membranes across which there is a diffusion of our gases. Fluid and surfactant layer in the alveoli. The alveolar epithelium, that is squamous epithelium layer, which is forming the alveoli. Epithelial basal membrane, interstitial space, this we have discussed in previous lecture, and capillary basement membrane and capillary endothelium. So whatever gas is there, oxygen and CO2 has to cross all these barriers. So this combination of barriers is called as a respiratory membrane. It is across the alveoli and the capillaries. So this is the basic side where actually there is a gas exchange takes place. Any problem here or any increase in this space will lead to defective diffusion. So let's see what are the factors which will affect the diffusion. So alveolar gas exchange is a process of oxygen loading in the blood and CO2 uploading in the lungs. That means from the alveolar to the capillaries, oxygen is transferred, and from capillaries back to alveolars, CO2 is driven back. So just simple mechanism of transfer of gases. So add air and the blood. So what is happening in the alveoli? It is rich in oxygen. So obviously from higher concentration to lower concentration there is a movement of gases. So what will happen constantly at the alveoli? So venous blood. We know that venous blood is having only 40 millimeters of mercury oxygen partial pressure, and atmospheric where is 104 we have seen. So this will try to match each other. So when it comes to our arteries, it will again come back to near 100. It will equal to this one. So from this is simple diffusion of gases across the respiratory membrane. On the reverse, CO2, the venous blood is rich in carbon dioxide. Alveolar air is poor in carbon dioxide. So movement will be from blood back to alveoli. So it will increase. So it will become 40 millimeters of mercury. So this is the respiratory membrane. So let's see what are the factors which are affecting the diffusion. Simple thing. Obviously, first important thing it will be concentration gradient. In the alveoli, oxygen we know is 104, and at the venous side it is 40. So there is net difference of 40 millimeters of mercury. Obviously there will be transfer of gases. So now it depends on this. When atmospheric is 160, it is now 104. If atmosphere is reducing, for example, if you are going to high altitude as I mentioned, where the partial pressure of oxygen is half the atmosphere, that means 80, and here it is 40. So obviously diffusion will be less as compared to our atmosphere. Or if you are going at very high altitude where the pressure in the atmosphere is 40 millimeters of mercury, so we'll have a very difficulty in breathing. 40, there will not be any movement. So that means atmosphere, if there is a reduced oxygen level in the atmosphere, we will develop hypoxia, oxygen deficiency in the blood. So hypoxia is reduced oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. So if there is a reduced oxygen in the atmosphere, obviously blood will carry less amount of oxygen. So this will happen. Similarly for the CO2, we know that here at the venous blood CO2 is 46 millimeter of mercury, and in the alveolar it is 40. So here there is a difference. The diffusion of CO2 is very high as compared to the oxygen. See, at this even the 6 millimeters of mercury difference, there is easy diffusion of CO2. So it is difference in the diffusion capacity of different gases. CO2 is more diffusible as compared to the oxygen. And second factor now will be the thickness of the membrane. This thickness, it will come moment the thickness increases, Most common cause of increased thickness is pulmonary edema, as we have discussed in previous lecture. If there is pulmonary edema, this thickness will increase and will have a poor diffusion. And last important factor, that is the membrane area. If the membrane is good, transfer will be there. If the membrane is damaged, if alveolars are damaged, some alveolars are damaged, we will not have a proper diffusion, because at that time we will not have any oxygen there, we will have a problem. So these are the factors affecting alveolar gas exchange: concentration gradient of gases, solubility of gases, membrane thickness, membrane area, and ventilation perfusion coupling, which we have discussed in previous lecture. So these are the different levels of gases which we have just mentioned: inspired air, alveolar air. This is the arterial, as I have shown, the physiological shunt, which is due to bronchial circulation in the capillaries, that is in the tissues and in the veins. This is the expired air. Okay, just to summarize: law of gases, composition of atmospheric air, respiratory membrane. So here we are finishing diffusion of gases.